Hey everyone, Sari here. I've been looking forward to this year's Choose Your Legends event and thought I'd share my first impressions of the roster after having some time to think about them. I actually meant to have this posted yesterday, so I'm sorry it took a little longer than I expected. Overall, I really like this year's units. The artwork is excellent across the board, and all four of them look like they'll be a lot of fun to use. Fighting them might be another story, but we'll figure that out over time. Let's start things off with Brave Marth. Overall, I think Marth is an extremely powerful take-on-all-comers unit. His weapon is loaded with powerful effects, and its conditions are pretty easily satisfied overall. He feels like the new benchmark for the God Sword archetype, which makes him a really attractive option if you haven't put one together yet. He's got a really solid stat line, complete with super boon options and attack and speed. I think speed will be his ideal option, since it does complement his special and kit very well. Genesis Falchion's a bit of a complicated weapon at first glance, with a laundry list of text to describe it. The slaying and dragon slaying effects are pretty universally useful, especially for easily activating his special. The rest of his weapon's effects rely on one of two conditions, either having a nearby ally or initiating combat. If either of those are met, he can also get no follow-up, healing per hit, and vintage, along with a pile of combat stats, depending on how many visible buffs his allies have. This visible buff check should be global. He doesn't need to be near his buffed allies for them to count. There are some easy benchmarks to keep in mind for this. His special, Shining Emblem, actually works like a free attack tactic, without the movement restriction, and as long as it affects 3 of his allies, it'll count for 18 total bonuses, enough to enable his null follow-up. A Dance from Peony that affects 3 of his allies counts for 36 total bonuses, enough to reach the second level of his effects. Unlocking Vintage can be a bit trickier, but his special offers an easy way to activate that too. Once he uses it, he'll buff his entire team with a +6 spectrum of stats, which fully enables his weapon. Outside of the easy access to visible buffs, his special also does a pretty sizable amount of extra damage that scales with his speed. A base kit neutral Marth without a seal can pretty reliably get 23 damage out of it. Distant Pressure is a new inheritable skill that Marth brings to the table. It adds a bit of extra speed to the base distant counter with the drawback of 5 recoil damage. The nice part of this is that the speed is active in both player and enemy phases. I don't know how much use this will see outside of Marth himself though, and even Marth might end up preferring a normal distant counter instead of risking the recoil. Marth has a few notable allies that work very well with him. The biggest one is Ashura. Not only does she effortlessly enable the second tier of his weapon, she also provides him and his team with Null Panic. This is extremely valuable, since panicked allies normally won't contribute to activating Marth's weapon. Caden's another excellent partner for Marth, especially as the unit who stays nearby to activate his weapon during the enemy phase. Marth can activate Caden's weapon with his special, which gives him very easy access to another +6 to every stat. Alternatively, Brave Lucina or Summer Hilda are great ways to make sure that Marth isn't shut down by guard effects. Marth's also got some very interesting options for alternative skill sets, depending on his team and his own role in it. Giving him Null Sea Disrupt is a great way to help him carve through any opponent, and pairing him up with Flayn or Niffle would let him keep some damage reduction at the same time. He has a few alternative options for his C slot too. Joint Drives are actually a solid choice, since he'll typically want to stay near one of his allies anyway. Pulse Smoke, as usual, is another great option, giving him a way to shut down any pre-charged specials that might cause him problems. Time's Pulse is another good tool for him, letting him pre-charge his own special and use it to break open the enemy front line, while also activating his weapon. His Ace slot is a pretty good choice as is, but if you decide to back Marth up with a Farsave bodyguard, you can replace it to turn him into a melee specialist. The new attack speed unity is a fantastic option for this, letting him take advantage of attack speed menace skills, from Note usually, or Bright Shrines. Solos are another good fit, giving him a bit more flexibility when setting up the fight, and stances are always a good defensive option. His seal is pretty flexible. Mystic Boost is a great option to offset the recoil from his pressure skill and provide some extra healing, while Steady Breath is a nice way to help him beat card effects, if you're not using an ally to help with that. I expect Marth to be a very solid offense carry, especially in Astro seasons. His combined effects seem well suited to handling a lot of the threats he'll encounter, and having Ashura to back him up should work out really well. I don't think we'll see him too much on defenses, since it's a lot easier for an offense team to shut him down with Panic. He's also very likely to be a prevalent arena unit thanks to his 186 BST, which lets him score as well as armors from the past year. His most obvious weakness is Panic, barring an Ashura on his team. Even if his allies avoid the debuff to keep his weapon online, Marth will almost always give himself a spectrum of +6 buffs at the start of a turn, and having that flipped into penalties can cripple any unit. He's also vulnerable to lunge or drag back effects. Pulling him away from his allies turns his entire weapon offline in the enemy phase, making it much easier to finish him off. If he isn't using Null Sea Disrupt, he's also vulnerable to the usual sweep and dazzle approaches. Just be careful when trying to meet a wind sweep check. Next, let's look at Brave Eirika. Like Marth, Eirika seems like an extremely powerful carry-style unit. Her effects aren't quite as loaded into her weapon, but combined they give her a monstrously powerful player phase. Her stats are very well allocated, and she even has a choice of 3 different super boons in attack, speed, and res. Attack and speed are both great options here. Speed helps her guarantee a second attack, while attack would help her secure heavy blade checks and punch through extra resilient targets. Binding Reagan leaves baseline effects, combine his slaying bonus with effective damage against both armors and cavalry. While she has at least 25% of her health to work with, it also grants her a spectrum of buffs and blunts the first attack she takes in combat by 30%. If she's also initiating combat, it neutralizes the effects that prevent her follow-ups, including both worry effects from her opponent and self-inflicted ones from Windsweep. Even on its own, this weapon is extremely powerful. It opens up several build options for her and makes her extremely hard to tank. Her personal skill, Moonlight Bangle, includes a few effects that really push Eirika into being a top-tier threat. Enabling Kanto is great. Even if it's not a 3-movement one like Reagan's, getting a fixed 2 movement that doesn't expire after the 4th turn makes her really mobile. It also packs in a Null Guard effect, giving Eirika very reliable access to her specials. The last part of this skill gives her true damage when her special activates during combat, scaling with the maximum cooldown of the special. It's a bit like getting a Moonbow's worth of true damage when using a special like, well, Moonbow. Luna bumps it up to 40% of her opponent's defense, while Dragonfang would get 50%. Aether would go up to 60%, but it's also the only special that she can't activate every combat, so I wouldn't recommend using it for her outside of arena scoring, and then only if you don't have Ruptured Sky available. The combination of her weapon and personal skill make Eirika extremely difficult to survive. Using a 2-charge special guarantees its activation on the second hit against any target, while 3-charge ones will always activate if her opponent counterattacks her. Using Heavy Blade can even let her activate 4-charge specials every combat. Eirika also brings a new inheritable skill to the table, Surge Sparrow. This skill feels like a pretty direct upgrade to Swift Sparrow, bringing the bonuses up to +7/+7 while also adding in a heal when a special activates during combat. It's important to note that this and Moonlight Bangle will work for any offensive special, including healing ones like Noontime and Soul. A lot like Moonlight Bangle, the heal amount scales with the special's maximum cooldown. A 1 cooldown special from a Slaying effect and Moonbow, for example, adds a free Noontime to the special's normal effect. A 2 cooldown special turns that into a soul's worth of healing, while a 3 cooldown special will restore 70% of the user's health. A 4-charge cooldown restores 90%, which is very nearly a full heal. You can push this to a full 100% with Ether and a non-slaying weapon, but a lot like with Moonlight Bangle, I wouldn't recommend it. You'd actually end up wasting the natural healing of Ether at that point. This skill can also be a bit of a drawback if you're trying to enable Wings of Mercy or Desperation units, since the heal will typically help push them back out of that range. Eirika should work well with a variety of allies, more than any specific one. Dancers let her take full advantage of her mobility and player phase combats to pick apart an enemy team, and she'll also appreciate tanks to retreat behind after picking off a key target. A far save partner can actually work really well against teams with only 1 or 2 key melee threats. While Eirika's base kit works extremely well at breaking through resilient targets, she can also be one of the game's most consistent Gale Forcers. With a bit of help from Quickened Pulse or Heavy Blade, she can Gale Force through any combination of guard or wary effects. Exchanging Surge Sparrow for Fury can help turn her into a Wings of Mercy beacon, though you'd need to be careful to avoid dropping her below her weapon's threshold for the follow-up combat. Wind Sweep is another useful option for Eirika. Giving up Moonlight Bangle is a lot to ask, but she does gain the ability to double almost any physical opponent without being counterattacked. Her default Menace is a really useful skill, but replacing it with Fatal or Panic Smoke, or even Savage Blow, can help her enable her teammates as well. While Eirika does seem like a natural fit for either raid's defense teams, it might be tricky to work her in until we get more mythics. The only current options to enable a 7th slot are both also melee blue units, which can open up a defense to being walled by a powerful green tank. I think she'll become more common over time though. She should also find a home on offense teams. Her ability to punch through nearly any target can be invaluable against savior teams, and mobility is always a useful option to have on offense. I don't expect her to be too common in the arena, though her 176 BST does make her a reasonably scoring unit. As intimidating as Eirika's player phase is, there are still some things she needs to watch out for. The most problematic enemies for her will be units that can match or beat her speed, denying her a second attack. Enemies with damage reduction that works on the second hit, like Brave Ike or Brave Edelgard, can also be a problem for her. She'll also need to be careful against multi-phase Brave weapons, since those can punch through her damage reduction and finish her off before she gets her follow-up attack. Next up is Brave Marianne. I've seen a lot of people be disappointed by her, and I do think that's partially justified. On the other hand, she still brings some very powerful effects to the table, and I think she's still a fantastic unit in the right teams. She also has a really excellent stat spread, complemented by super boons in both attack and speed. Either one should work well for her, although I'd lean towards speed myself. Winning speed checks is an important part of her ability to survive. I think most people, including myself, were expecting Marianne to have Blute Gang here, but she does make a capable mage. Her Phantasm Tome offers her a souped-up full speed res, as long as she's fighting an enemy with at least half of their health left. But the real spice is the 70% damage reduction she gets when initiating. That's almost the same amount that Claude gets from Fallen Star, and gives her an extremely safe player phase as a result. Her special, Requiem Dance, has a bit of a misleading name. While it's tempting to think of it as a dance effect, it's in the name after all, and it does affect her ally, it's actually much more similar to Gale Force. In fact, outside of the target of the skill, it's essentially the same skill as legendary Leaf's Norrøn Seal. The twist here is that Marianne's version refreshes an ally within 2 spaces, rather than herself. While that might sound underwhelming at first, especially after going through Marth and Eirika's kits, it's important to consider how well these skills work together, and the fact that they're given to a colorless infantry mage. Marianne's offensive stats are extremely high, and together with her weapon's lull and her native null follow-up, I don't expect her to have many problems securing knockouts. There are also a large number of ways to navigate around gravity effects at this point. Kanto, Orders effects, aerobatics, even a basic Wings of Mercy, all of which are very common features of Gale Force-oriented teams. Marianne also brings our third Unity variation to the skill pool, Attack Speed Unity. This is a skill I've actually been looking forward to for a while. It's extremely strong in ether raids, allowing your attack speed heavy carry to actually take advantage of enemy Bright Shrines, or Notes who are using their default menace, instead of needing to try and avoid or soak them. Marianne should be able to work well with most units, though she'll probably be most at home on a Gale Force heavy team. Donating an extra action to a Gale Force unit, or Dancer, is always a plus, giving her team all the options they need to dismantle the opposition. I do think that Marianne will be better off replacing her default Unity with a different skill. Attack Speed Push would combine nicely with her weapon's damage reduction to let her get safely into Wings of Mercy range, while Flashing Blade would give her a very reliable special activation. She can also run both, using the Seal slot for Flashing Blade. I expect Marianne will mostly find a home in air offense teams. While she is a powerful threat on defense teams, her one-hit damage reduction might not be reliable enough to keep her alive against player-controlled strategies. And her special would also get defused by Pulse Smoke even if she survives. She'll probably be a rare sight in Arena, even with her choice of attack and speed super boons to push her to 175 BST. Marianne's key weaknesses will be similar to Legendary Claude. Enemy phase Brave effects will cut through her damage reduction very easily, as will specific threats like Young Inns. Pulse Smoke will also be a problem for her if she fails to secure a knockout, since it'll prevent her special from activating. Finally, we've got the Gatekeeper. I remember laughing for several minutes when I saw the results after the voting finished, and I've been looking forward to seeing him in the game ever since. While I don't think anyone expected him to be a mage, I think his kit is one of the most entertaining designs we've seen in the game for a while. Gatekeeper's weapon, the Charging Horn, is much more support-focused than his fellow brave heroes. Its primary effect is a lot like Peony's weapon, if Peony's weapon affected triple the area and gave an additional 2 attack and speed. It's a really reliable effect, and probably harder to avoid getting the bonuses than it is to have them active. He also gains extra effects for himself, based on the number of allies he's granting those bonuses to. Each ally in that area lets him apply a -2 penalty to his opponent's attack and res, up to -6. Having 3 allies in the area also gives him a wary effect, and if he happens to be near a breakable block, or a structure that his opponents can break, he gains the full effects immediately. His personal skill, Detailed Report, is where a lot of his utility comes from. It works a lot like Obstruct, but without a health threshold to worry about, and with twice the range against ranged opponents. This really actually helps him interfere with ranged cavalry units that might try to run past him to reach his allies. The really powerful part about the skill, though, is its ability to shut down enemy teleportation. Being able to prevent enemies from using Wings of Mercy, Orders effects, aerobatics, guidance, or anything else like that to enter his attack range is an extremely powerful effect. Gatekeeper actually brings 2 new skills to the inheritable pool. Joint Tribe Defense, like the other Joint Tribes, is a solid useful support skill for just about any team. Close Reversal, meanwhile, is a direct upgrade from Close Counter. It's not necessarily as strong as Close Foil unless you're fighting dragons, but it's still a useful skill for a ranged tank. Gatekeeper should work well with a variety of allies. Hit and run teams will really appreciate his ability to deny movement in a large area of the map, along with his cross-map combat bonuses. Solo carries will love his cross-map support as well, along with his ability to intercept anything that tries to move past them to find a squishy backline. He should also work really well with savior strategies, particularly for armored units with a solid speed stat. Gatekeeper's skills are really flexible, depending on what role you're trying to fit him in. I do think he'll be best in a more supporting role than a frontline carry, and his native joint drive is a great way to complement this, and can be swapped out for whatever drive effect his team works best with. Close reversal, while useful, is probably better off changed for his stance skill. Quick riposte is an ideal seal for him if you want to help him secure knockouts, but giving him another drive or closer distant guard can help bolster his allies instead. Gatekeeper feels like a natural fit for either raids, particularly for helping shut down Wings of Mercy chains while defending, or Harmonic Catria setups while attacking. It'll be interesting to see how people work him into their teams though. Offense teams in particular tend to be very tight on space for supports in the vault, and defense teams will need to be carefully built if Gatekeeper himself isn't too threatening. His arena prospects will be a lot like Marianne's. He might turn up from time to time, but even with the defense super boon pushing him up to 175 BST, I don't think he'll be too common. Overall, I'm really happy with this year's Choose Your Legends winners. Gatekeeper and Marianne offer some really fun gameplay twists, while Marth and Eirika are pure powerhouses. Picking one of the four for your free summon can be difficult. I personally recommend holding on to the free summon until after you've finished summoning on the main banner, and deciding what you want from there. Beyond that, I think the ideal free pick will depend on your current roster and personal playstyles. Or just favorites. Marth is a great pick if you don't currently have a go-to Omni-Tank or Sword Omni-Tank. He should be an excellent frontliner, and scores the best in arena modes of the set. Eirika should be a great pick if you're looking for a hit-and-run unit or Gale Force Cavalry. She should age extremely well, thanks to her effective damage and a wishlist set of effects, and I think overall she actually might be the strongest single unit out of these four. Marianne's a bit more of a niche pick than the others. She should still be a great way to complement Gale Force teams, and is an excellent colorless mage in her own right. She's also my pick for the best fodder of the new units, if none of them actually interest you. Gatekeeper, to me, feels like the best one-off unit of the set. His utility and support options are spectacular, and you don't actually need to merge him up to take advantage of them. I also think we're unlikely to see another way to shut down teleportation effects for a while, if ever. I hope this video helps you wrap your head around this year's Choose Your Legends roster. There's a lot to process in this set. They're all really cool units, and I'm looking forward to experimenting with all four of them. If you have any questions, please let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.